Maria Bonfigli. My maiden name was Anna Maria Cordani. I was born in Costa Riempi in 1945 at the end of World War II. I remember being told by my mother that at that time the Germans were actually, their command post was in our house, and she was pregnant with me, and my brother was staying with her parents in the town of Bergassi. Both of these towns are in the region of Gravago, and in her parents' house, it was the Americans and the English were stationed there, and that it was a very difficult time. We also, at that time, she told me that the Americans requested a launch of paratroopers so they could get behind the German line. And that, I remember growing up with my father making us shoes and using the parachutes, the fabric from the parachutes, to make the top of the shoes, and the bottom were made out of wood, just like the Dutch. And that practically everybody in that town, they used the fabric for sheets and for clothing and everything. And then when I got older, I was going to school in the town of Osaka. That is also it's close to, on the way to Borgotaro. We had a long walk going to school. There was actually no paved roads. Everything was just, we used to call them sentieri, like little paths to go there. We used to get a lot of snow. It was a one-room schoolhouse, so we went from the first grade to the fifth grade. And each student, every day, had to bring a piece of wood so we could have heat in the school, because we only had a stove, and that's how we used to keep warm. And then we used to walk back, and it was probably about maybe 2-mile walk to get back home. It was difficult at times, but it was a time where I think children, or myself and the other children in the town and all the other small towns, we became very good friends, and it was a very happy times. We were really without the televisions, and there was none. We had no radio, we had no running water, but we managed to have very happy childhoods. We used to make our own toys, and that's it. And after school, when I was about 5 years old and 6 years old, my brother was 18 months older than I. We used to go and take care of the animals. We had cows, goats, sheep, rabbits, chickens, and all of those things. And we used to take the cows up in the mountains to let them eat and then bring them back home. Had to feed the rabbits and things like that. And we had no school on Thursdays because that was market day, so that was the only time that you would go shopping to Bardi or to Borgotaro. And either place, it was about a 2.5 to 3 hour walk. There was no buses, so we walked. And even if you needed to go to a doctor, that was it. You had to walk to those places. There was nothing closer. The thing is also, then we had to bring the stuff back home, which was kind of hard. You went empty-handed and you had to carry whatever you went to buy, and you had to bring it home. But even that, I remember halfway through, my mother would always buy mortadella. To this day, I love the mortadella because we used to stop, she used to buy bread and some of the mortadella, and we would stop and have like a little picnic before we took the rest of the trek home. That then when I was 1954, I was 9 years old. My grandfather was killed in an accident. He was in the forest cutting a tree, and with another gentleman, and he was, once the tree had been cut on one side, he went with a lever on his shoulder to try to get the tree off the stump, and the lever went in the wrong direction and it killed him instantly. It was a very traumatic experience, I think, because at that point I was living with my grandparents. I remember my grandmother running and yelling his name. I have never been able to forget that sound. Two years later, my father's was from a family of 8 brothers and sisters, 4 of whom were in the United States, 3 of whom were in the United States, and they sponsored him. So in 1954, he came to the United States, and then he sent the papers for us, and we came in 1956, in April of 1956. It takes 9 days. It took 9 days to cross the Atlantic. And for, I guess, about 7 of those days, I was actually in, I guess, the infirmary of the ship, because we hit a storm at sea, and I was seasick the whole time. And that was a very frightening experience, because we come from the mountains, never having seen the ocean, and then to have the ocean waves that look like they're going to swallow the ship. It took me until 2015 to get over the fear of getting on a ship again, because I was so frightened. Life was hard. We farmers, and as a matter of fact, my father had, in order to sustain, because the only extra money that we could get, we actually used to go, my brother and I guess to help out, we would go into the woods and we used to gather juniper berries by the ton. And then there was a company, we used to get them all together in Novelia, and they would come with the truck and pick them up. And I could never figure out why did they want these juniper berries until I came to the United States and I smelled and I tasted gin, and then I knew that that's where they made the gin. We also used to also pick up, I guess, a little cash money for us, acorns. We used to do the same thing by the ton. The companies used to buy and also in the springtime when the sap is running, we used to cut the little branches of the pussy willows where there was no other branches. It had to be a clean branch. So we would strip it, let it dry, and bundle them, and there again we used to sell those. And those, as I said, instead of the technology that we have today, that's how we used to keep busy. But for my father as well, it was very hard, because if you had a hard winter, or if the climate even we tried to be self-sufficient. Actually, the only thing that we ever bought was oil, because our region did not produce any, and sugar. Everything else was practically self-sufficient. We grew the wheat, the corn. The wheat used to be ground. We used to go to the mill, which still exists today. Then now it's now a restaurant. They turned it into a restaurant. And from there, we used to make the bread and the flour, whatever we need. Actually, my grandmother taught me how to make, I guess by the time she had a little stool made, and by the time that I was around 4 years old, I had learned to make bread and cheese and butter and all the other things that you needed to survive. But as I said, my dad had a, I don't know how you would call it in English, but we used to have a bull, a prize bull. Il toro di razza, they used to call it. So they used to bring the cows, and he used to charge maybe, I don't know if it was 1,000 liters. I doubt it, because that sounds like an awful lot of money at that time. And that's how we survived. However, I guess he wanted a better life for us, and his brothers in the United States asked him if he wanted to come, and he said yes. And in those days, in order for a person to come, you had to be sponsored. They also had to put a certain amount of money in escrow accounts, because they had to guarantee that in case that you couldn't find a job, or if you got sick, the other person was willing to pay for these things. So I guess he was lucky his brothers and his sisters did that. And then, as I said, 18 months later, I guess, so close to 2 years, we came. And as soon as I got to the port, and we got off the Christopher Columbus, I wanted to go back. My first impression was the west side of New York City, with the low houses 4 or 5 stories high, with the fire escapes. I guess I was used to running around in the mountains, and the freedom. I just, for this first 6 months, I found it difficult, even though I had cousins here. The language was hard. There was nobody. Actually, there was only 2 other, myself, my brother, and 2 other children that came from Italy. There was nobody to help us learn the language. So I went from the end of the 5th grade in Italy to the end of the 5th grade in the United States. I'll never forget the first time, and it was very nice. One of the students, I guess they were trying to help me. They figured they'll take the homework down from the blackboard. And they wrote out, they were supposed to do catechism or something like that. So they put the word page PG and then CAT. And I could not figure, I went looking, I got a dictionary, and I'm saying cat. What are they talking about? Cat. What is it? I couldn't. So it was, then I decided, all right, we have to get serious here. We have to really get it. And within 6 months, believe it or not, I did manage to speak English. Not probably as well as I do now, but we managed to, because there wasn't anybody that to help you out. You had to either sink or swim. I was also the only girl that had pierced ears. So I got a lot of ribbing of that, because they all made fun of the girl with the pierced ears. And nowadays, I guess I'm not so unusual anymore. Then I continued to school. I went to grammar school there at St. Agnes on 45th Street between 3rd and Lexington. Then I went to Cathedral High School downtown, and I studied as a secretary. Those days, Cathedral had like 7,000 girls. but the St. Joseph branch was the one that had a 4-year course for secretary, but you also learned other things, history, bookkeeping, all of those things. And that's it. Then I met my husband at the annual dance of the Family Community Club, believe it or not, here. And I started dating them. I was quite young, and he was in the military. In those days, on 2nd Avenue, most of the buildings were 4 or 5 stories. From, I would say, 42nd to about 63rd, the majority were Italian. There was a lot of Italian. And we used to have places to socialize. We used to have Altaro on 45th Street. We had, let me see, there was I can't even think of the name now. There's 2 other places, one on 63rd and one where we used to go dancing. But of course, in those days, going dancing meant my father, my mother, my brother, and myself. That's how we, that was the entertainment in those. My aunt and my uncle lived at 316 and 320 East 49th Street. Those buildings still exist. It's a 5 flights walk up. It was before they built 860 and 870 United Nations Plaza. They were built after we were there. From there, I used to take the bus there and go to school from there. I started working after I graduated in 1964. And I was working for the Kellogg Company on 3rd Avenue, but of course that was not the cornflake Kellogg. It was an engineering firm that was worldwide. And I was there for many years, and then for about 2 or 3 years, then I got married. I have 2 daughters, and this second one was diagnosed with severe learning disabilities. So it was at that time, she is now 46 years old. It was very hard to find help. It was easier actually to do nothing than to actually do something. But with the right information and help, the pediatrician and so on, she is able to travel by herself. She can go to the city, she can go to Times Square or 34th Street and change trains and go everywhere by herself. She's been working at the same job for 21 years. And she's married. Her husband is a computer geek, I think. So they get along very well. She talks a mile a minute and he doesn't talk. My other daughter is 51, and she is at home, stay-at-home mom at the moment. And I have 2 grandchildren, a granddaughter at 22 and a grandson of 19. And in the in-between years, since maybe 1992, my husband and I had a very challenging life in the sense that I had my mom, my dad, his mom and dad all sick at the same time. We actually ended up at one time having all 4 of them in hospitals, all different hospitals. And the challenge was that none of them spoke English. Even though my mother-in-law was born in the United States, so she was an American citizen, but she went to Italy when she was 3 years old. So she never learned English again when she came, because where we are right now in Astoria, they're mostly Italian, and she worked with Italian and so on. My mom developed Alzheimer's at the age of 62, and she lived for 25 years with it, and she was at home. My dad developed a very rare disease called amyloidosis, that when he had it, some of the doctors didn't even know what he had, that they had no cure and they didn't know what caused it. And so within 14 months after he was diagnosed, he died. My father-in-law developed dementia, and my mother-in-law died of cancer, actually the day after 9/11. So for 15 years, we really didn't have a chance to really socialize or go anyplace. After they all passed, that's when I personally started to get involved with the club. My husband joined earlier because he was just one of the officers. He really wasn't as involved as he is right now because now he's the president. And I became the correspondence secretary. And I found that in a sense, when you come here, it's like going home, because when you go back to Italy, the Italy I left is not there. The music is, they have rock and roll, they have rap, it's completely different. They even have, most of their music is English on the radios. Yet when you come here, I guess it's the music of my childhood. So, and most of the people here, that's what it comes down to. You go back to a childhood. It feels like family. It doesn't feel like a club in the sense that everybody knows everybody for years. And it is one of the most welcoming place and comfortable place. The big dances, they're all great because they do a lot of good, they raise money, but it's not the same. It's not the same. Here there is a feeling of comfort and camaraderie. It's just, and hopefully we're trying to keep it alive. Although the majority of the members are past a certain age and the young generation is not interested. The club was started actually in 1927 by, I believe, 5 members, and it was done for the purpose of having the incoming immigrants get acclimated or get involved into the communities here. They used to have a doctor on staff. They used to help the people to find jobs, and if they didn't, they also used to pay them. It was $15 a week unemployment. This is 1927. So, and then they would get together to play cards or to have the dances as a means of keeping touch with all the people from the same regions, because this club pertains to, there's, I believe, 6 regions. Tuscany, Emilia-Romagna, Lombardia, Veneto. I think the other one is Piemonte. I'm not exactly sure. I would have to double check on those. And only people born or parents born in that area can be members of this club at this time. And there is now a discussion trying to see if we open up to other regions. So as of now, it's still like that unless they change the bylaws. But I'll have to double check on those. I have actually, what I have done, because of my 2 grandchildren, when my granddaughter was 16, and my grandson as well, but they're 16. So I took them on a tour of Italy because I wanted to introduce them to Italy, but also to introduce them to, because my father had 4 remaining brothers and sisters in Italy, so there's tons of cousins. And I wanted to let them get to know each other. And the good part of it is that because of modern technology, believe it or not, they do keep in touch. Because in Italy, they start teaching English in kindergarten, and most of them speak some English, which is pretty great. So they, we keep, and then the same thing with my grandson. And I took them to where I was born, where I had to walk, and they kept saying, "Sure, Nonna, you walked all of that distance." I said, "Yeah, we had no choice. That was it." I mean, milk, we didn't have to run for milk. We had the cows. We had to milk the cows. I forgot that. I used to be able to do that too. I think what I learned that it isn't so much the possessions that you have that make a difference in your life. Your friends are really, your family, the love, and is what sustains you in life. Assets, money can come and go, but your name and the way you treat people will follow you. It's, I really strongly believe that I don't think, and I hope to God I never do or did subconsciously, judge a person because of what they have and not because of who they are. And I must say, my husband and I have a tremendous amount of friends. We're really blessed because we really have friends that when time was the time we needed them, everybody was there for us. So you don't forget those. You don't forget those.